Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
We always try to bring you the most fascinating and thought-provoking topics.
Hmm.
And, well, today is no exception. We're going to be looking at some intriguing connections. Connections between verses in the Quran and some modern scientific discoveries.
Oh, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, we actually have a proposed podcast script.
Yeah.
A whole script devoted to just this intersection.
Yeah. Wow.
And trust me, you might be pretty surprised by some of the things we're going to uncover. So, are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's do it. I'm always fascinated by these kinds of connections. You know, how ancient texts can kind of resonate with these scientific findings that we've only come to much, much later. It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And the script doesn't waste any time, jumping right into the good stuff. It starts by highlighting a verse from Surah Al-Anbiya. And this verse talks about, the heavens and the earth.
Yeah.
How they were initially like a closed-up mass, and then, they were opened up.
Yeah.
It's hard not to think about the Big Bang Theory when you read that, right?
Yeah. The resonance is pretty striking for sure. But what's interesting to me, I think, is that the Big Bang Theory itself is pretty recent, relatively speaking. It wasn't until the early 20th century that Edwin Hubble observed an expanding universe. And then, of course, you have Georges Lemaitre, who proposed the idea of this primeval atom where everything started.
Right. So basically what we're saying is the Quran might have alluded to this whole concept way before Hubble or Lemaitre.
Potentially, yes. It's definitely a fascinating thought. And it really makes you wonder about, the sources of knowledge and inspiration that were available to people back then.
It definitely does. Okay, so moving on from the creation of the universe, the script then shifts to the topic of, embryology. And there's this passage in Surah Al-Mu'minun that describes the stages of human development. It's actually in a really remarkable detail. What are your thoughts on that section?
Well, it's amazing how the Quran describes it. It talks about the transformation of sperm, right? Into this clot of congealed blood and then to a lump of flesh and so on. It's what's remarkable to me is that these descriptions are actually very similar to how we understand embryonic development today, with terms like zygote, morula, and blastocyst.
Yeah. I have to admit, I had to do a little bit of refreshing on my embryology terms. But it is incredible how those ancient descriptions seem to line up with our scientific understanding. And get this, the script even mentions a pretty prominent embryologist, Dr. Keith Moore. He actually wrote a book called The Developing Human.
Oh, I know that book.
And he acknowledges the accuracy of these descriptions.
Yeah, it's pretty significant when someone like Dr. Moore, a leading expert, recognizes these insights from the Quran.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so let's shift gears a bit. The script then moves on to a topic that's a little more grounded. It talks about mountains. I've always been fascinated by mountains, these strong, these immovable structures. But the script points out a verse from Surah An-Naba. And this verse describes mountains as pegs. What do you think? What's the significance of using that metaphor?
Well, I think on the surface, it might just seem like a poetic description. But when you actually think about it, when you delve a bit deeper, it hints at something really profound, a scientific truth. Mountains, with their roots, their deep roots that extend far below the Earth's surface, they play a crucial role in stabilizing the Earth's crust.
Oh, so it's like they're literally acting as pegs, holding things in place.
Exactly. They prevent the tectonic plates from moving too much. They act like anchors. And without mountains, imagine that. The Earth would be so much more unstable, so much more volatile.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like the Quran is giving us this glimpse into the science behind plate tectonics way before, we even knew what that was.
Yeah, and what's even more fascinating is that this understanding of mountains as stabilizers, it wasn't just theoretical back then. People would have experienced earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. They would have understood the power of the Earth's movements.
So for them, this description of mountains as pegs, it would resonated with their lived experience.
Oh, absolutely. It reflects their understanding of the world around them. It's a testament to the power of observation and how knowledge can be embedded in language.
This whole deep dive it's full of these like aha moments. Okay, are you ready for the next one?
I think so. Hit me with it.
All right. This one is this was pretty mind-boggling. The script focuses on a verse from Surah Al-Hadid. And it talks about iron. It says that iron was sent down to Earth.
Okay.
Now, at first, that might not seem like a big deal. But when you think about what we know from science about the origins of iron.
Well, then it becomes a whole different story. Iron, you see, it's a heavy element. And it's not. It's not naturally abundant here on Earth. It's actually forged in the heat, the intense heat and pressure of supernovae, exploding stars, and then it's scattered across space, traveling vast distances before reaching us here on Earth.
So the iron we use every day, for our buildings, for everything, even the iron in our blood, it came from exploding stars.
It did. It really did. And that description in the Quran, the iron being sent down, it takes on this whole new dimension. It reflects this understanding of the origins of the elements and how they came to be a part of our world and a part of us.
It's like this cosmic connection tying us to the vast universe.
It is. It really is.
And to think that this was hinted at in the Quran centuries ago. It's just wow. How about we take a quick break? We'll come back and dive into the next point.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, it really does make you think about our place in this vast universe.
It does. Okay, so are you ready to keep exploring these connections?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. The next topic that the script dives into is water. It's something that we all kind of take for granted, but it's fundamental to life, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And there's this verse in Surah Al-Anbiya that states, well, pretty simply, we made every living thing from water. It's a straightforward statement, but it's really profound when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, from a purely scientific point of view, water is essential for all life forms, all the ones we know of at least. It plays a role in everything. Cellular functions, metabolic processes, even photosynthesis, how plants convert sunlight into energy.
Right. And to think that the Quran recognized this vital role of water, centuries before modern science came along.
And it goes even deeper than that. I mean, think about it. Today, scientists who are looking for life on other planets, what's the first thing they look for? Water. If there's water, there's a good chance there could be life.
It's like the Quran was hinting at this essential truth all along. Okay, the next topic in the script is, well, the atmosphere. Yeah. Something else we probably take for granted. There's a verse from Surah Al-Anbiya that describes the sky as this protected canopy. It sounds a lot like the ozone layer, doesn't it?
It does. It's a great analogy. The Earth's atmosphere, it's like a shield. It protects us from all sorts of things. Harmful radiation from the sun, space debris, extreme temperatures, you name it.
It's like this giant invisible force field protecting us.
Exactly. And it's interesting because the Quran doesn't just mention that protective nature. It also hints at its role in regulating temperature, making the earth habitable. There's another verse in Surah Ar-Rum that says, God made the atmosphere suitable for you and sent down water for you from the sky.
Oh, wow. So it's not just protection. It's about creating the right conditions for life.
Exactly. And again, this understanding of the atmosphere, it would have resonated with people back then. They experienced the scorching sun, the desert winds. They understood the value of this protective atmosphere.
It's so fascinating how these things connect.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next topic. This one's about the sun and the moon. There's a verse in Surah Yasin that talks about their movements. To me, that just sounds like basic astronomy. What makes this stand out?
Well, what's interesting is the Quran doesn't just describe them, just as objects in the sky. It actually talks about their roles, how they regulate time, how they provide light and energy for life on Earth. Surah Yunus even mentions that God made the sun and the moon, each running for an appointed term.
So it's recognizing their importance for life and the fact that they're governed by these predictable laws.
Right. The Quran even mentions the moon's influence on tides. Surah Isra says, God subjected the moon for you and made the night as a garment and the day as a means of subsistence.
It's like the Quran is acknowledging this delicate balance of the natural world, how all these elements are connected.
Exactly. And for people back then, understanding these celestial bodies, it was crucial. Their lives were so closely tied to the cycles of day and night, the changing seasons. The sun and the moon, they weren't just distant objects. They were a part of their daily existence.
So it's not just about scientific accuracy. It's about how these descriptions would have been understood, in the context of their lives.
Absolutely, yeah. It's about understanding the Quran's message within its historical and cultural context.
This is making me think in whole new ways.
Yeah.
Okay, the script then goes back to the universe on a grander scale, the concept of an expanding universe. We touched on this with the Big Bang, but the script specifically mentions how the Quran states that that the heavens and earth were a closed-up mass that was opened up. What do you think about that?
It's one of those statements that takes on a whole new meaning when you consider it alongside modern science. The idea that the universe started from a single point and has been expanding ever since, well, that's a cornerstone of modern cosmology. And the Quran, centuries earlier, seems to be suggesting this very concept.
It really is incredible. It makes you wonder what other insights might be hidden within the Quran.
That's the beauty of exploration and discovery. There's always more to learn. And as our scientific understanding grows, well, who knows what other connections we might find.
So true. Okay, let's switch gears a little and talk about something a bit closer to home. The human body. The script talks about how the Quran describes human embryonic development in great detail. It even mentions different stages, like the clot of congealed blood, the lump of flesh. I was pretty amazed by how detailed those descriptions were.
Oh, it's remarkable. When you compare those descriptions to what we know today, to modern embryology, there are definitely similarities.
And to think that those descriptions were made centuries before we had, the technology to actually observe those stages.
Exactly. It really makes you think about the sources of knowledge that were available to people back then.
It's like a window into a different way of understanding the world.
It is, and it highlights the importance of being open to different ways of knowing, of recognizing that scientific knowledge isn't the only valid form of knowledge.
Well said. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. The script brings us back to mountains. We talk about them as stabilizers, but the script points out another verse from the Quran, this time from Surah An-Naml, and it states that God made the mountains high. What do you think about that description?
Well, on the surface, it might seem like a simple fact, but when you think about it, within the context of the Quran, it takes on a deeper meaning. Mountains, they're imposing, they're grand, and they often symbolize strength, stability, even spiritual elevation.
So it's not just about their physical characteristics, it's about their symbolic meaning.
Exactly. Mountains are often seen as places of refuge, places where you can connect with the divine. You see this idea in many cultures and spiritual traditions throughout history.
It's interesting how even something like a mountain can hold such a powerful meaning.
It shows how interconnected the physical and spiritual can be, how the natural world can inspire awe and wonder in us.
Okay, the next point in the script is one that I think we've all heard before, the idea that the Quran mentions the expansion of the universe. We talked about the Big Bang earlier, but the script highlights a specific verse from Surah Az-Zariyat that says, "And the heaven, we built it with power, and indeed, we are expanding it." I have to admit, when I first read that, I was blown away. It's hard to deny the parallel to what we know about the universe today.
It is a powerful statement. And what's interesting is that the Quran doesn't just mention that the universe is expanding. It emphasizes the power behind it. The word power, qua, in Arabic, it suggests this immense, unstoppable force.
It's like it's acknowledging the sheer scale, the magnitude of the universe, and the forces that are at work.
Exactly. And this understanding of the universe, as this dynamic, ever-expanding entity, it's remarkably consistent with what modern science has discovered.
It really is. Okay, so let's move on to the next point. The script takes us back to the human body, specifically embryonic development. It highlights a passage from Surah Al-Mu'minun that describes the stages in really remarkable detail. It mentions the transformation from sperm into this clot of congealed blood and then to a lump of flesh and so on. What are your thoughts on that?
It's fascinating how these descriptions actually align quite closely with what we know today about embryonic development. Terms like zygote, morilla, blastocyst.
Right. I have to admit, I had to refresh my memory on some of those embryology terms. But it is incredible how these ancient descriptions seem to foreshadow our modern understanding.
It really is. And it's worth noting that even prominent embryologists like Dr. Keith Moore, who literally wrote the book on the subject, have acknowledged the accuracy of these descriptions.
Right. The script mentions his book, The Developing Human. So we're talking about a leading expert in the field recognizing these insights from the Quran. That's pretty significant.
It is, and it encourages us to think critically about the sources of knowledge and be open to these connections between seemingly different fields.
I couldn't agree more. All right, the script then takes us back to something a little more grounded. Mountains. We've already talked about their role as stabilizers, but the script highlights another interesting aspect of mountains that's mentioned in the Quran. Surah Ghafir states, "And he has cast into the earth firmly set mountains, lest it shift with you." It seems like the Quran is recognizing the importance of mountains for our stability here on Earth.
That's right. And it's not just about preventing the earth from shaking. Mountains also play a crucial role in the water cycle. They act as natural water towers, collecting rainfall and snowmelt, and then that water feeds rivers and streams, which provide water for agriculture and human consumption.
So they're not just stabilizers, they're also essential for our water supply.
Exactly. And this understanding of the importance of mountains would have been particularly relevant to the people living in the Arabian Peninsula, where water is scarce, it's precious.
It really makes you appreciate how everything in the natural world is interconnected.
It does, and it highlights the importance of respecting and preserving our natural environment.
Absolutely. Okay, you ready for another wow moment? This one's about iron. The script focuses on a verse from Surah Al-Hadid that talks about iron being sent down to Earth. Now, I'll admit, when I first read that, I didn't think much of it. But then I remembered what science tells us about where iron comes from.
And suddenly it becomes so much more profound. See, iron is a heavy element, and it's not naturally abundant here on Earth. It's actually forged in these incredibly intense conditions, the heat and pressure of supernovae, exploding stars, and then it travels across vast distances of space before it reaches us here on Earth.
So the iron we use to build our cities, the iron in our blood, it literally came from exploding stars.
It did. And that description in the Quran, the iron being sent down, it takes on this whole new dimension. It reflects an understanding of the cosmic origins of these elements that make up our world, that make up us.
It's like a cosmic connection tying us to the vastness of the universe.
It really is. And to think that this connection was alluded to in the Quran centuries ago?
It's mind-blowing.
Okay.
All right, what's next on our exploration? The script mentions water again, but this time in the context of its crucial role in supporting life. Surah Al-Anbiya states, "We made every living thing from water." It's such a simple statement, yet it holds so much truth.
Absolutely. From a scientific perspective, water truly is the foundation of life as we know it. It's involved in every level of biological organization, from cells to ecosystems. It's essential for cellular function, metabolic processes, even photosynthesis, how plants convert sunlight into energy.
It's amazing to think that the Quran recognized the vital importance of water for life so long ago.
It is, and today, the search for extraterrestrial life, it focuses primarily on finding planets with water. If there's water, scientists believe there's a good chance of finding some form of life.
It's like the Quran was hinting at this essential truth all along. Okay, let's move on to the next topic in the script. This one is about something we often take for granted, the atmosphere. The script points out a verse from Surah Al-Anbiya that describes the sky as a protected canopy. It sounds a lot like what we know about the ozone layer, doesn't it?
It's a very fitting analogy. The Earth's atmosphere acts as this shield, protecting us from harmful radiation from the sun, space debris, extreme temperatures. Without it, life on Earth as we know it wouldn't be possible.
It's like a giant, invisible force field that allows life to thrive on our planet.
Exactly. What's interesting is that the Quran doesn't just mention the protective aspect of the atmosphere. It also hints at its role in regulating temperature, which is crucial for creating a habitable environment. Surah Ar-Rum mentions that God made the atmosphere suitable for you and sent down water for you from the sky.
So it's not just about protection. It's also about creating the right conditions for life.
Right. And this understanding of the atmosphere's importance would have resonated deeply with people at the time. They experienced the scorching heat of the sun, the harshness of the desert winds. They would have intrinsically understood the value of a protective and life-sustaining atmosphere.
These connections between the Quran and modern scientific understanding are truly fascinating. It's like the Quran was offering a glimpse into the scientific principles that govern our world centuries before we had the tools to fully understand them.
It speaks to the power of observation and the enduring human quest to understand our place in the universe.
Okay, ready to move on to the next point. The script takes us back to the grand scale of the universe and the concept of an expanding universe. We already touched on this earlier with the Big Bang Theory, but the script points out that the Quran explicitly states that the heavens and the earth were once a closed-up mass that was then opened up. What are your thoughts on that?
It's another one of those statements that takes on a whole new meaning when we consider it in light of modern scientific discoveries. The idea that the universe originated from a single point and has been expanding ever since is a cornerstone of modern cosmology. And the Quran, centuries earlier, seems to allude to this very concept.
It makes you wonder what other insights might be hidden within the Quran just waiting to be uncovered.
That's the beauty of exploration and discovery, isn't it? There's always more to learn, more connections to make. And as our scientific understanding continues to evolve, who knows what other parallels we might find.
It's an exciting thought. Okay, so the next topic in the script takes us back to Earth, but this time it's focused on the human body. The script points out that the Quran provides remarkably detailed descriptions of human embryonic development, even mentioning different stages, like the clot of congealed blood and the lump of flesh. I have to say, the level of detail in those descriptions really impressed me.
It's quite remarkable, isn't it, when you compare those descriptions to the stages of embryonic development as understood by modern embryology, the similarities are undeniable.
And what's even more fascinating is that those descriptions were made centuries before we had the technology to actually observe those stages.
It makes you think about the different ways of knowing that have existed throughout history.
Absolutely. Okay, ready for the next point. This one's about mountains again. Now, I know we've already talked about mountains as stabilizers, but the script highlights another verse from the Quran that describes them in a slightly different way. This verse from Surah An-Naml states that God made the mountains high. What do you make of that description?
Well, on the surface, it might seem like a simple statement of fact. But when you consider it within the context of the Quran's overall message, it takes on a deeper significance. Mountains, with their imposing height and grandeur, they often serve as metaphors for strength, for stability, and even spiritual elevation.
So it's not just about their physical characteristics, it's about their symbolic meaning as well.
Exactly. Mountains are often seen as places of refuge, places where one can connect with the divine. And this idea is reflected in various cultures and spiritual traditions throughout history.
It's interesting how even something as seemingly mundane as a mountain can hold such profound symbolic meaning.
It speaks to the interconnectedness of the physical and the spiritual, the way that the natural world can inspire awe and wonder.
Yeah, it really does. And it highlights how those descriptions would have been understood, in the context of their time.
Right. It's not just about the scientific accuracy. It's about how it would fit into their understanding of the world. Okay, ready for the next point.
Sure, what else is there? So the script then goes back to the universe on a grander scale. The concept of the expanding universe. We talked about this a bit earlier with the Big Bang,
Yeah.
But the script specifically points out that the Quran states that the heavens and the earth were once a closed-up mass, and then they were opened up. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's another one of those statements that kind of takes on a whole new meaning when you consider it alongside our modern scientific discoveries. The idea that the whole universe, originated from a single point and has been expanding ever since.
Mhm.
That's like a cornerstone of modern cosmology. And the Quran, like centuries earlier, seems to be suggesting the same concept.
It really makes you wonder what other insights are hidden in the Quran.
Oh, I'm sure there are more. That's what's so exciting about exploring these ancient texts. There's always something new to discover. And as we learn more about the universe, well, who knows what other connections we're going to find.
That's a great point. Okay, let's shift gears a bit now and talk about the human body. Something a little more familiar.
Right.
The script points out that the Quran, it describes human embryonic development. A really remarkable detail. Even mentioning different stages like the clot of congealed blood, the lump of flesh, and so on. It's pretty amazing how detailed these descriptions are, isn't it?
It really is. It's quite remarkable, actually. When you compare those descriptions to the stages of embryonic development that we know of today through, modern embryology, the similarities are undeniable.
And the fact that these descriptions were made centuries before we had the technology to actually observe those stages.
Yeah. It makes you think about the different ways of knowing that have existed throughout history and how knowledge is transmitted and preserved.
That's so true. Okay, I'm ready for the next point.
Let's hear it.
It's about mountains.
Okay.
Again, we've talked about them as stabilizers, holding the Earth's crust in place. Right. But the script highlights another verse from the Quran, from Surah An-Naml, that says God made the mountains high. What do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting. On the surface, it seems like a simple statement of fact. But when you think about it in the context of the Quran's overall message, it takes on this deeper significance. Mountains, with their height, with their grandeur, they often symbolize strength, stability, even spiritual elevation.
So it's not just about their physical characteristics, it's about what they represent.
Precisely. You know, mountains are often seen as these places of refuge, places where people can connect with the divine. And this idea is, it's not unique to the Quran. You see it in many different cultures and spiritual traditions.
I can definitely see that. It's interesting how something like a mountain, something we see every day, can hold such a powerful meaning.
It speaks to the interconnectedness of the physical and the spiritual, how the natural world can really inspire a sense of awe and wonder.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's your biggest takeaway, from exploring all these connections between the Quran and modern science?
Well, I think it's a reminder that there are many ways to understand the world around us. Science, of course, is a powerful tool. It gives us this framework for explaining natural phenomena. But it's not the only way of seeing things. The Quran, with its poetic language, with its imagery, it offers a different perspective, one that emphasizes the interconnectedness of everything and the awe-inspiring power of creation.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. It's definitely been a fascinating journey for me, exploring all these connections. It's given me a lot to think about.
I think it's a journey that never really ends. As we continue to learn and grow, who knows what other connections we might uncover, what other insights we might find.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe some of those future discoveries will be inspired by the insights found in ancient texts like the Quran.
Well, that would be something, wouldn't it?
It would be. So to everyone listening out there, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep asking questions. What resonates with you? What new questions does this raise for you? And how does it all deepen your understanding of the world, of the universe, and the mysteries of faith? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep wondering.